Compete for prizes that included 5 free tickets to our all-black party on February 16th, where everyone will dress in all black and join us for a night of fun. Tomorrow, we'll be having a service day at T.C. Miller Elementary School. And on Friday, we'll be having an honorary walk around campus starting and ending at the chapel at 4 p.m. We encourage everyone to come out and celebrate the great legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Also, if you participated in the raffle on your way in today, if you have one, we will email you by Friday and let you know. Now, without further ado, please help me welcome the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Week Planning Committee Vice Chair and the Black Student Association Vice President to introduce Ms. Penny Blue, Madam Vice President Brian Carter.
Hello, everyone. I get the absolute pleasure to introduce Ms. Penny Blue. And Penny is currently the Virginia Program Director for Red Wine and Blue and CEO of Pennywise Gateway, which provides leadership training and consulting. She is the author of A Time to Protest, Leadership Lessons from My Father Who Survived the Segregated South for 99 Years. The book was published February 2020, just prior to the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent worldwide protests to follow. The book shares the many local stories of protests Penny's father shared with all his children on an ongoing basis, which helped to mold their work ethic, drive for justice, education, political involvement, and to help the undeserved. The book underscores the many ways to protest education, voting, self-respect, hard work, all that he and his wife instilled in their 10 children. However, the main theme is standing up and speaking out for what is just and right. Penny believes in order to be treated as first-class citizen, one must act as a first-class citizen. She has served her community by volunteering during the Barack Obama 2008 campaign as grassroots community organizer for Franklin, Henry, and Pennsylvania counties, and helped turn Virginia blue and helped provide the biggest congressional upset in 2008. Penny served as the local, state, and national presidential delegate in 2008. In 2019, she helped turn Richmond blue as the Southwest Program Director for the Virginia League of Conservation Voters. Following in her father's footsteps, she served on the Franklin County School Board for 2 terms after being denied an opportunity to teach in the Franklin County school system. Even though she had just retired IBM after 25 years of service as a delivery project executive, a proud graduate of Hampton University with a mathematics degree and an MBA from Duke University, along with taking the educational courses from UVA through the Rhodes Learning Center. As the only Black on the 8-person board, she was able to galvanize the community and lead the effort for the school board to add the Confederate battle flag as a hate symbol to their dress code, which means the Confederate battle flag is not allowed on the Franklin County School System's campus. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Ms. Penny Blue.
Great, thank you. First, I would like to thank the University of Lynchburg and Dr. Canada, and of course the Office of Equity and Inclusion, and the committee for Martin Luther King Jr. Week. I am so humbled and proud to participate and be a speaker at a Martin Luther King Jr. event. Me saying this is actually giving me chills as I say it, so I truly do appreciate it. I am glad that you guys are calling this a courageous conversation, because I love courageous conversations. And those are the types of conversations that we need to have, are courageous conversations. So this theme is Black Excellence, and the title of my speech today is King Did More Than Dream. I want to repeat that. My title today is King Did More Than Dream. I'm here today to share with you that King did much more than dream. 56 years after Dr. King's assassination, 60 years after King's famous speech, I Have a Dream, and 40 years after unrelentless tenacity of Mrs. King galvanizing the country into making his birthday a national holiday. I wanted to remind you of this because many times we forget the struggle that actually got us to where we are. So when we do that, and the other piece is that I have found that this country now is very comfortable in celebrating Dr. King's birthday. Would everybody agree with that? They have Dr. King breakfasts, luncheons, celebrations all over the place. And I have attended a number of them, and they're always so nice. But what I want to share with you today, one of the reasons I believe that everybody's so comfortable celebrating Dr. King's birthday is wrapped up in the fact that America has just as America has whitewashed its history, America, both black and white, have neutered Dr. King's history to only "I have a dream" and the "I have a dream" speech. And when I see that, clearly they have not read or listened to the entire speech, because it was much more than "I have a dream." The other piece is that the majority of people, both black and white, that celebrate Dr. King's birthday was not a big admirer of Dr. King. And if they were in his lifetime, they would not be an admirer of Dr. King. You see, Dr. King was a radical. Most people don't realize that. He spoke truth to power. And anytime you speak truth to power, you are a radical. And when you speak truth to power, it can be a lonely road. Most people celebrate and quote Dr. King today, don't use his controversial quotes, but use quotes that benefit them. One of the latest examples is when Dr. King's daughter, Dr. Bernice King, responded to the comedian Amy Schumer's post on Twitter. Amy has been very vocal, sharing her support for Israel, and shared a video of Dr. King condemning anti-Semitism and defending Israel's right to exist. Bernice responded, "Clearly, my father was against anti-Semitism. He also believed militarism, along with racism and poverty, to be among the interconnected triple evils. I am certain he would call for Israel's bombing of the Palestinians to cease, for hostages to be released, and for us to work for true peace, which includes justice." You see, Dr. King did much more than dream. Yes, he dreamed. Dreaming is very important. But we all know to turn our dreams into a reality, it takes work. Dr. King did the work. Dr. King is black excellence. Dr. King strategized. Dr. King planned. Dr. King collaborated. He marched. He spoke truth to power. He spent his time, talent, and treasures to make his dream a reality. And we all benefit from his blood, sweat, and tears. One of my favorite quotes of Dr. King is, "A man can't ride your back unless it's bent." And we all need to stand up. As many of you are aware, I wrote a book, and I have it in the back. But the theme that runs through this book is my dad was a man that stood up. In my studies of history and interactions with people, I have found that you have to be taught how to be a slave. You're not born with a mindset of being a slave. Not only do you have to be taught how to be a slave, you have to be taught how to be a second-class citizen. And when I share this information with students in a classroom, I make certain they understand when I say taught, it's not like I'm standing in front of you as a teacher teaching you, or as they go through the day and someone teaches them. We are taught in some of the most horrible ways. So I remind people of this scene, which I'm sure most of you guys in here have never seen, because it was in a scene in Roots. And Roots, the original Roots came out in the 1970s. And so there was a scene in Roots where the master of the plantation bought Kunta Kinte from a slave ship. And most owners of slaves would rather buy them, well, would rather raise them from birth so that they could teach them all along versus buying them off the slave ship. Because if they buy them off the slave ship, these people are used to being free. And they have to be taught how to be a slave. Well, this man bought Kunta Kinte, and he had a slave named Fiddler. And it was Fiddler's job to teach Kunta Kinte how to be a slave. And why do I share this with you? Because that is one of the traditions or methods that's been passed along to today. Because you also have to be taught how to be a second-class citizen. So the plantation owners knew that it was more dangerous to buy Africans off the slave ship versus breeding them on the plantation. And the big piece of this with Fiddler and Kunta Kinte was, as Fiddler was teaching Kunta Kinte how to be a slave, Kunta Kinte was in the barn at night trying to figure out how to get free. So he finally gets free, and when Fiddler brings his food in that night, he's really excited. He's like, Fiddler, you know, I'm free, I'm free. And Fiddler's upset. He's physically, visibly, and mentally upset. And why is that? Because he says to Kunta Kinte, you're in big trouble. But not only are you in trouble, you got me in trouble. Do you know how long it has taken me to get that extra piece of meat at Christmas? Or get that extra straw in my bed? Now that you are no longer acting like a slave and you have to run away, it gets me in trouble also. And I share that because that still goes on today. And when I share with the students about someone teaching them how to be a slave, I make certain that they understand, as I said, it's not someone standing up before them doing teaching. We were taught how to be slaves in the most brutal of ways. Watching our loved ones being beat with a whip. Withholding what little food we got. Taking away any little comfort that we had. And the most despicable and distressing was selling our mama. Or selling our daddy. Or selling our babies. And I want you to think about what it would feel like if you were in your home with your mother or your father and someone comes in and takes them and sells them off and you never ever see them again. That is what happened. Or as a parent, they sell your child and you never see that child again. Well, the same goes, as I said, for being taught how to be a second-class citizen. Some of those things, you had to go around back in order to enter a space or a house. Our superstars, such as some of the people that you may have seen on, well, you guys may not have seen, but you might have heard of Motown and Smokey Robinson and some of those people have to enter through the kitchen and to perform in the dining room. Separate but unequal schools. Losing your job if you speak out. Being blackballed in communities. Serving whites first at black events. And that still takes place today. I'm a witness. And again, the most despicable and distressing was the daily lynchings of our fathers. The daily lynchings of our brothers and of our sons that dared to progress. So as I said, this practice has survived the times and been passed on to both races with regard to teaching someone how to be a slave or teaching someone how to be a second-class citizen, which is one of the reasons I get in a lot of trouble. Because my parents didn't teach me how to be a second-class citizen. So I don't know how to do it. But what I want to share with you today about Fiddler, now that you kind of understand the concept, is that I actually understand Fiddler on the plantation. I really do. I even understand a little bit about Fiddler with regard to doing Jim Crow and lynchings. But guess what, guys? It's time for us to put Fiddler where he belongs. It's time for us to put Fiddler in the past. It's time for us to put Fiddler in history. We need to give Fiddler a good old-fashioned homegoing. One of the reasons, as I said, I was not taught how to be a second-class citizen, because I was blessed, very blessed, to have a mother and a father that lived their lives before us, the 10 children, not bending over. Along with my father sharing his stories of protest to his 10 children on a daily basis. My dad and mom did not frequent Jim Crow establishments. So if you had to go around back to eat, or you couldn't eat in the dining room, they didn't go. And they did not allow their children to go to Jim Crow places. And we lived on a farm. So we had tobacco, cows, pigs, gardens, you know, all those things that you have on a farm. And we had to do the work on the farm. But my dad would not allow us to go work for other farmers. So I share one of the stories that I have in my book. We were all outside playing, and my dad was in the backyard, and etc. And this white man drove up, and he says, "Charles, why don't you let your wife and children come work for me? I'll pick them up, I'll treat them good, I'll feed them good, I'll pay them good, and bring them on back home." My dad said, "Why don't you let your wife and children come work for me? I'll pick them up, I'll treat them good, I'll feed them good, I'll pay them good, and I'll bring them on back home." The red rose up in the man's face, and he drove off. But that's the type of dad I had. When Choice came to Virginia, and Choice, for you guys that don't know, it was in 1954 that Brown versus Board of Education that required the school systems to, I'm going to call it desegregate versus integrate. But Virginia refused to do that. So it wasn't until 1965, which is 11 years later, that Choice came to Virginia. And what that means is that black parents could choose to send their children to the white schools. And most parents didn't. My parents did. I had 4 siblings of school age at that time. And so they went to the white schools. And of course, there were daily fights. Every morning when we got on the bus, it was a fight because people didn't want us to sit down. And every evening we got on the bus, there was a fight because people didn't want us to sit down. So there's a number of stories that happened. But with my dad, he was talking to the superintendent. And the superintendent said, "Well, you know, Mr. Edwards, you know, you got to give the white kids a chance to get used to your children. You know, they got to get used to your children." And my dad responded back, "Well, they're going to get used to my children fighting back, because I told my children to fight back." So it was many stories like that with regard to the integration period. And the other thing about my parents, my mom and dad both were practicing the gig economy long before the term gig economy was termed. My dad rose before 6 a.m. every morning and went out and did farming while my mother prepared breakfast. And then we all ate breakfast, and as we went off to school, my mother went to the high school, she was a cook, and my dad went to this very large church that he cleaned up. Once 2 o'clock came, my mother had finished cooking at the school, and my parents would get together and drive to Ferrum College and clean up a building. Once they finished cleaning up the building, they drove back through Rocky Mount and cleaned up a bank. And so they got home at 11 p.m. or midnight every day, Monday through Friday. And this particular, the church that my dad cleaned was an AME church, huge church. And when he took the job, the church was filthy. But my dad got it spotless. When you went to this church, you could eat off the floor. And so the AME church, they changed ministers on an ongoing basis every 2 or 3 years. So this one particular minister came and he told my dad, he said, well, you're not here 8 hours a day. You know, we paid you for 8 hours a day. My dad said, no, you paid me to keep this church clean. So they couldn't agree. So they had to go to the board. And of course the board knew what the church looked like before my dad started cleaning it, and they knew what it looks like after my dad started cleaning it. So they told the minister, Charles is not going anywhere. If anybody goes anywhere, it would have to be you. My mom and dad were black excellence. I strive for black excellence daily. My experience of not getting hired as a teacher in the Franklin County school system was not totally because of the white community. It was because of the fiddlers in the black community. And I've just shared with you what a fiddler is. And in this day and time, it is still the fiddler's responsibility to keep other black people in their place. So after I didn't get the job, I did go before the school board, and of course the school board didn't pay any attention to me at all, just ignored me and gave me no support. So then I went and got an underpaying job in Franklin County and ran for school board. And guess what? The fiddlers in the community were calling people in the community to tell them not to vote for me for school board. Of course I won. They were shocked, and I was one of 8 on the school board and the only black on the school board, which is kind of normal for Franklin County. Franklin County started having a black person on the school board in the 70s, one at a time. So with this, I did a number of things, but one of the things that I did was, as noted, is that I was able to galvanize the community to get the school board to vote that the Confederate flag was a hate symbol and did not belong on the school campus. And of course, when I first brought this up, all the other 7 members on the board were like, what are you talking about? It's not a hate symbol, it's heritage. You know, history, yes, it's the heritage and history of hate. So we had long discussions over months, and the black community came out and supported me. They spoke at all the different board meetings, but I guess they got tired, and some got scared. It was interesting. A group of black leaders in the community got together and had a meeting, and they decided they would no longer push to have the Confederate flag as a hate symbol and not belong on the school campus. But of course they didn't tell me, but they told the superintendent. And I'm sure the superintendent told some of the other board members, but they didn't tell me. So I'm sitting up on the dais, still fighting to have the Confederate flag banned, and now they're coming up speaking to say it's okay. So someone called me the next morning to share with me what was going on. And they did, and said, but don't be mad. I said, look, I'm not mad. I don't have the space or the time to be angry. One of the things that my mother always told me is keep your eye on the prize. And I kept my eye on the prize. Plus, I shared with him that nobody knows the history or the story of black and white people and black people better than me. In other words, this is something, that happens. In addition, I reached out to a person in the community to talk to her about them continuing to come support. And she was afraid because she responded back and basically said, they really appreciated me starting this, and now that I had it on the books, maybe we need to kind of just be quiet, let things go so that we can keep the community together and etc. But I continued to push, and my family continued to support me. My family came to every meeting. So after the George Floyd murder, we finally took a vote and banned the flag. But even with that vote, it was 6 to ban, 0 no, and 2 abstain because they didn't have the courage to vote yes or no, but they wanted to vote no. So I wanted to share this. And the reason I continued this is because, you see, part of black excellence is knowing the strength that it took Rosa Parks to stay seated on the bus. Black excellence is also knowing Rosa Parks was not the first to give up her seat on the bus or other forms of public transportation. So you got to do this more than once, and you got to continue to push. Black excellence is understanding the power of an education. Black excellence is knowing the power of excellent performance. Black excellence is understanding how our political system works and how it impacts our daily lives. Black excellence is standing up. Black excellence is getting out to vote and you getting others out to vote. Last but not least, black excellence is knowing who you are and whose you are. Because when you know you have been created by the master of the universe and understand those ancestors that came before you, it provides a strength like no other. Which is why we stand proud, so we can dream big and then be ready to stand up and do the work. I strive for black excellence daily because regardless of what I have to deal with to progress, I know it's nothing compared to what my ancestors dealt with. We owe our ancestors black excellence. I leave you with this question. What are you doing with your time, your talent, and your treasures with regard to continuing the struggle for our freedom? Are you bent over, or are you standing up for black excellence? Thank you. And I would love to entertain some questions so that we can have a courageous conversation. Does anybody have a question?
Any questions from you?
Did you ever have any doubts that you would kind of follow in your dad's path, or did you always know this is the path that you wanted to take?
As far as me being on the school board following my dad's path?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. When I think about one of the things my dad used to say is that most children do what their parents do. And my book, what I did, I collected the stories that my dad used to share with us. And it was interesting, it wasn't until I collected the stories before he passed and I was going to publish them. But then I said, well, I need to contextualize them and put the history around it in my family. And then I titled the book. And it wasn't until I was looking for the title of the book that I realized my dad was telling us stories of protest all along. And so it's like you fed it on a daily basis. And so that's just how we grew up. And it's funny, the other thing I say in my book is that I have 9 other siblings. And if you all have siblings, you know, you might get into arguments, or you might say, how in the world did they grow up in the same house as me? Well, I do that too, but the reason I know these other 9 souls that walk the earth are my siblings is because when there's a job that they have to do, they get it done. And 2, the protest. We believe that we're first-class citizens, and nobody has walked this earth better than us than Jesus Christ, and that's how we act. Thank you for that. Yes.
What was the favorite thing, your favorite thing that your mom made?
My mom was an awesome cook. And believe it or not, I wasn't into desserts, even though she was good at it because the food was so good. So I go back to seconds. But you probably won't like, most people won't like this, but you know when you leave and you come home and your mama makes your favorite meal, I would have her make me liver and onions. Fried potatoes and gravy and a biscuit.
I like the second part.
Okay.
There was a professor that I had talk like my sophomore year, Dr. Fred Opie, and he has some books out about cultural oppression as well. And in one of his books, the title's linked to like all his favorite recipes and different dishes that he's come across through his experiences. Like, I was just wondering, is there anything that ties these dishes or food in general and oppression? Like, is it that food makes you happy and oppression makes you sad?
I'm not quite sure what you mean, but I will say this. When you talk about food in a black family and a black community, one of the reasons black mothers used to cook for their children so much because that's all they had to give them. You know, they couldn't give them cars, they couldn't give them money. All they had to give was food. And the other thing about black cuisine is that black people were able to take the scraps from the master's table and make a cuisine out of it. But outside of that, that's...
Thank you.
Anybody? Yes. Let me do in the back and then I come back up front.
Okay. Was it?
Yeah. Hi.
Hello.
I have a bit of a question because it sounds like your parents were very direct in what they wanted in terms of their self-respect. And my dad's like that too, but I don't know where that energy went because I'm not really like that. So I was wondering if you had any tips for someone who's maybe kind of shy, but like understands when there are boundaries that are crossed.
I would say that just because you're shy doesn't mean that you're not taking up to your father. And the reason I say that, like it's 10 children in my family. We have some that are very loud. We have some that are very shy. But loud or shy, we all know when a boundary's crossed. And we don't allow those boundaries to be crossed. So you don't have to be, loud or etc. And my mother was quiet, but she did not allow certain boundaries to be crossed. And so does that help from a standpoint that just because you're shy doesn't mean that you don't consider yourself a first-class citizen? Because that's really what it's about. It's about considering yourself a first-class citizen and making certain people treat you as a first-class citizen. Hope does that help?
Yes, thank you.
And up front right here.
Miss Ruby wants to talk.
Oh,
I just wanted to say that a lot of times people don't believe in the power of one. A lot of times if you just stand up and, just speak for yourself, you don't need a whole group of people with you. I'll never forget that when I was in college, it was only about 16 black students on the campus. and they used to play Dixie and wave the Confederate flag at every sports event. And so all the black students would get together and talk about how much we hated it. And so we agreed that we were going to go to the president and tell him about it. And we were supposed to meet at the president's office at 9 o'clock the next morning. And guess how many people actually showed up? Me. So I went in and I talked to the president and I told him that tonight at the basketball game, most of the players on the floor are black. And if you all play Dixie or wave the flag, the basketball players are going to walk off the court. Of course they were. I mean, I just said that. They got their consent that they were going to do that. But do you know, from that day forward, they stopped playing Dixie, and we got rid of the Confederate flag. So a lot of times, just speak. I mean, you might be afraid, but the very first time you do it, it'll give you the courage to do it the next time.
It gets easier and easier. And it's really about just taking up for yourself. This young lady up here had a question.
Hello. So one thing that I think about as a Native American woman a lot, and just all the work that we do in our office, is cultural tax. And so I think there's a lot of pressure on black women, black people, just to be excellent at all times. And how do you feel, or how do you, like, what are your opinions on this cultural tax and the toll that it takes on you mentally, physically, like you're being just a black woman and all that you have to do and accomplish just to prove, or just to feel like that first-class citizen? Can you speak on that?
I can, and thank you. That's an excellent question. And I was gonna, let me say this too. Even though I talk about my dad like I'm talking, you'd be surprised if my dad were walking here. He was just very unassuming. He wasn't big and boisterous, and you know, that's very nice. People loved him to death. He just didn't take any crap. It's hard for me with that particular. Did you all hear her question? And I hear people say that all the time. But my parents didn't put that pressure on us. It was 10 of us. And we all made different grades and etc. I have a sister that has a PhD in education. I have an MBA, and I have another sister with an MBA. 8 graduated college. All 10 graduated high school. But I was never pressured to be extremely great. And just like some women have this thing, like they think they have to be a superwoman, I've never felt that. I've always known that I needed to be Penny, and the best Penny that she could be. And I think, you know, probably, you know, that's what's best. But even with that, working, let's say at IBM, and well, I spent 25 years at IBM. And one of the things that we had to do as black women or black men, we always had to prove ourselves over and over and over again. Now we would do something great where, let's say they had been a white woman, she would have gotten an award. You know, I didn't get one. Or actually, people wrote to the headquarters in IBM, and they came and investigated. I was in Charlotte, North Carolina. And they identified that, you know, when blacks first went into management, we had to go off shift or manufacturing. When whites went into management for the first time, they could go on shift and be managed programmers, you know, that they were. And that black men, there were certain levels where you get paid by the hour, and they would promote the black men to this first level where you didn't get paid by the hour, so it looked good because it was a promotion, but they actually made less because they're not paid by the hour, and they never got over that particular hump. So, again, I think it's because of how I was raised, and I know who I am and whose I am. Other people try to define me. Other people I may have to prove myself more than once, but I always know who I am. And I don't feel that I have to be a superwoman or the best black person that's ever been on earth. And I wish that for most people. Anybody else? Yes, in the back.
Do you have any advice for anyone in the room who may be interested in writing their own book, how to get started?
Yes. How I got started was, he was asking me, I've always kind of known I wanted to write a book, but I'm not a writer. My degree's in math, so, I'm not a writer. And so I decided I would collect my dad's stories and publish them. But then I was doing training in my business, Pennywise Gateway, where I went around and trained people in leadership and project management. And I met a woman that published books, helped publish books. So I got with her, and I shared with her my vision of what I wanted, and she was really excited about it. So we sat down and mapped out what it was that I would do. And so I put the stories around it, and she helped me flesh it out and published it for me. Nobody has any questions about Fiddler or being taught how to be a slave? Yes?
Have you ever thought about tracing your background or your African?
I can't hear you.
Tracing your background. Wait, forget the mic.
I was asking, have you ever thought about tracing your background to Africa or your lineage or something?
Yes. But it's difficult to do. And the reason I say it's difficult to do, in my book I talk about my parents, my father's parents, and their parents, because my dad knew his grandparents, and his grandparents had been slaves. But there's this book, it's a children's book. It's called Born on the Water. And the reason it's called Born on the Water, if you think about all the different countries in Europe, and people here, they say, oh, my ancestry is England, or my ancestry is Great Britain, or my ancestry is Spain. Well, African Americans, most of us don't know what country in Africa we're from, because we were born on the water. When I say that, it's because you were collected from all over Africa and put in a huge boat, didn't speak the same language, you had to learn a new culture, it's like babies and so forth. So most black people cannot trace their ancestry back any further than the 1865 census, because that's the first time that blacks were in the census, so I can go back that far. Unless you own a large plantation, and on the large plantation, the owners kept track of, just like you keep track of, I got 6 horses and 2 tractors and 10 slaves, and they named them. So unless your ancestors were on a large plantation, it's hard to do. But now I have been to Africa, and I've been to Senegal, Gambia, and Ghana, and spent 2 weeks over there traveling. Yes?
When is the right time to protest?
Anytime it ain't right. And that's the theme of this book. My dad didn't do protests like in groups of people, because he knew that he couldn't be nonviolent, so he didn't participate in those types of protests. So what I call a time to protest, I call education protesting. I call voting protesting. I call standing up for yourself protesting. And when I say anytime, my sister in the back, I can tell you some stories. We were in, in a steak place in Roanoke. I can't remember the name of the steak place. And I went to, what's the name of it?
Longhorn.
Longhorn. And I went to the restroom, and I came back, and I saw that, I can't think of his name, the cowboy. I can't, for some reason, I knew his name that day. But anyway, I said to Ruby, I said, you know, they had this black cowboy up on the way into the kitchen. And I said, all the other cowboys in this restaurant are fake. Where Bill Pickett is a real cowboy. And they have a picture of Bill Pickett that nobody sees because he's on the way into the kitchen. What did I tell her that for? So she goes and asks for the owner. The owner comes out. She takes him and shows the owner, Bill Pickett, and that all the other cowboys in this restaurant are fake cowboys. The only real cowboy you got is Bill Pickett, and he's on the way to the kitchen that nobody sees. The next time we go over to Longhorn, Bill Pickett is right up front. On your way out the door, you can't miss it. And that's what I mean by individual. One person can make a difference. And you'll be surprised if you just share something with somebody. I tell people all the time, how are people supposed to know that you have crossed the line if you don't tell them you have crossed the line? So I'm very comfortable telling somebody when they've crossed the line. I don't have to say it mean, but I'm going to let you know you've crossed the line. And I think it was Maya Angelou said, you know, you have to teach people how to treat you. And I'm going to share this one other story. Because I came home in 2007 to help with my dad. And I went into this minute market, not too far from me. And the guy behind the counter says, oh, do you mind waiting and let her come? She's been in here for a while. I almost lost my mind. I was so shocked. And I was like, yeah, I mind. But what I should have done is what my mom and dad would have done, which was put the stuff on the counter and say, yeah, she can go, I'm gone, I'm not buying anything. Well, then I found out that it happened to my brother-in-law and somebody else. But then my sister, Ruby, had taken this guy to the store to do something. And he comes out of the store and says that they did the same thing. He said he was angry and he started not to allow it. That's why people continue to treat people that way, because we allow people to treat us that way. You can't allow people to treat you that way. And you don't have to be mean about it. Just tell them. Anybody else? Yes.
I know a lot of young people in here today, and I don't want to get too political in terms of the election, but I think there's a lot of confusion about how, you know, with whom do we actually place our trust in terms of the vote? And can you give some advice on how to make decisions about voting?
Yeah, let me share this. The other thing I talk about in my book, I call this term blacklash, not backlash, but blacklash. And America is about power. And it's certain people in power, and they're trying to hold on to the power. And if you look back in America's history, even in colonial times, you had indentured servants and you had slaves. Well, believe it or not, these people could mingle, talk, deal with poor people, all that was cool. But then there was a gentleman who decided he was going to protest on the king because it was being still ruled by England. And he got the blacks, the slaves, the indentured servants, and the poor farmers all together. And it was called Bacon's Rebellion. So they put it down. And then the people in power said, we can't have this again. We can't let all these people get together. So then they said, okay, so now we're going to have rules for the slaves and rules for the indentured servants and the farmers. And the farmers, I know you're poor, but you're better than the slaves, and you're white. So it's about, we're going to treat you a little better. So that went on for some time, and of course then you know the Civil War and all that kind of good stuff happened. And the enslaved became free. Well, the problem then became that the newly freed black people were getting elected to Congress and the Senate and doing well. Black people in the South are the ones that started the public school system in the South. It's the first time poor white people, black people, and people with special needs got a free public education. It used to just be for the rich white male. Well, then that became a problem. So they pitted the poor white people and the black people against each other again. So it's about keeping people separated. And believe it or not, when Trump ran the first time, and he was in the Republican primaries when there was just the Republicans running, I was on the school board. And we were in Richmond. It was a statewide meeting. And this gentleman was up, he gave the State of the Union and the State of the State. And the room was full. It was in a Marriott, it was about 200 or 300 people. And he asked, how many people believe that Trump is going to win the primary? 3 or 4 people raised their hand, and I was one of them. And I bet my superintendent that he was going to win, because people were, oh no, he can't win. How do I know? Because I know my history. And Barack Obama had just won the presidency, and that's the problem. So that's why all this other stuff is out. And when he tells you he's going to do something, he's really going to do it. And then, after he was running against, was it Biden?
The second time?
The first time.
Oh, Clinton.
Clinton. So when he was running against her. And he came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and et cetera, et cetera. I was having a conversation with some young people. We were at an event, and this young black guy, he says, well, I'm kind of thinking about possibly voting for Trump. I said, that's because he hasn't told you the fence he's going to build around you. It's them today, is you tomorrow. And people need to understand that. And it's about pitting the different groups and people against each other. And that's what everybody's scared about now, is because there's so many people of color in the United States, and it's scaring the power structure. Does that help? Or do I need to be a little more detailed? I mean, does that make sense? Does anybody have questions? Okay, great.
Ms. Blue, what advice would you give to young leaders of the community, or people who want to step up and become young leaders in the community?
One of the main things with me, one of my joys is seeing other people be successful and helping other people be successful. That's what brings me joy. And being collaborative, I know you all hear that word a lot, but I truly believe in it. Listening to other people. With me being an African American female, of course I know my struggle. But I've learned that some other folks have struggled also from different things. And I believe in talking with other people and sharing. One of the things that I learned is that, and a psychiatrist told me this, people know, like, what they know, how they grow up. So, white men have a difficult time understanding racism and sexism. Black men understand racism, but not so much sexism. White women understand sexism, but not so much racism. Black women, we understand both. They call it intersectionality. So one, I will listen to you and I will share with you information because I believe that everybody needs to learn. But with doing that, I still demand respect. I'm not gonna allow you to disrespect me. But if you wanna just sit down and have a conversation, I can do that. So really, it's about being yourself, knowing, and I truly believe, you know, it's about knowing who you are and whose you are.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blue, for your time. Can we give Ms. Blue one more round of applause? All right, we're gonna stage a couple pictures real quick. If we could have the lacrosse team come up real quick. I know I'm gonna put all of you on the spot. Thank you.
And if anybody wants a book, they're in the back, and I will sign them.
And if anybody wants a book, they are in the back, and Ms. Blue will sign them.
Wow.
All right, there are a lot of you custodians. Y'all try to squeeze in just a little bit for me. Thank you. Okay, so we have our professional photographer over here, Jonathan, and then we have me. So Jonathan's gonna take your pictures first, and then I'm gonna take a picture of you, so go ahead.
All right, 1, 2.
Perfect. All right, and then my turn. All right. 3, 2, and I was taking it while I was counting. Thank you. All right, and then can we get OEI up on this Penny Blue?
Not me.
Well, thank you, Lacrosse, for coming, and thank you everybody else who came.
Thank you, guys.